Sorry about that. As we were saying, this is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of 280 Group, and this is Roger Snyder.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Sorry for that. We were talking and we were muted, but now we're going.
Common problem.
Yeah.
And we are, again, so very excited to bring you the second installment of our Product Leadership webinar series. Roger will be leading you all through his expert tips on how to build great products with superior product management skills. And now we will just get started by going over a few housekeeping items.
Mm-hmm.
After this webinar, continue to stay engaged with the product management community. As product leaders, many of you share the same challenges, so get connected with your peers by joining our LinkedIn group today.
Mm-hmm.
In a short moment, I'll be pasting a link for you to join our LinkedIn groups where you can share best practices, talk about your issues, and get notified as we release great new content. At 280 Group, we love interacting with our fans, and during this webinar, we encourage you to ask questions and give us feedback. You can use the chat box located on the right of your screen to type in questions or comments at any time.
Mm-hmm.
We will leave time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, and we would also like to take this opportunity to answer the most popular question we receive, which is, can I watch this webinar later? Well,
Mm-hmm.
Can they?
Absolutely.
Yes. All attendees will receive a link to view the webinar after the webinar has ended.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, thank you for joining us today. On the agenda for today's webcast, first, I'll take a minute to introduce what 280 Group is all about, and then we'll go over what you can expect from our Product Leadership webinar series.
Mm-hmm.
After which, that's when I'll turn things over to Roger.
Very good.
So at 280 Group, our mission is to empower product managers to do great product management and become product leaders. We do that with our methodology and framework, the Optimal Product Process, or the OPP as we call it. The OPP was designed by senior product leaders with a combined 150 years experience. It is a powerful framework that works for products in any industry at any stage of the product lifecycle and also with any development methodology. The OPP is just one pillar of how 280 Group helps transform product teams around the world. Continue your learning after this webinar and make sure to download the Optimal Product Process ebook from our free resources.
Very good.
We are so excited to bring you the second installment of our webinar series. We really have put a lot of thought into our topics. We talked with many of your peers to uncover priorities of product leaders who want to improve their product teams. Our Product Leadership webinar series covers some critical topics across several themes. For those of you who joined us last time, we spoke about how to transform teams and optimize them to produce great products. Today, we will be focusing instead on how to develop teams and skills. Our ultimate goal, of course, is to help you and your teams build great products that delight customers. So that's a little about us.
Mm-hmm.
Who's in the audience today?
Great question. So we took a quick look at our registration data, and we saw that we've got a great PM audience coming together today, a mix of product owners, product marketing managers, the sweet spot is product managers, but also a number of leaders of product management, either directors or VPs of product management.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We know you have a busy schedule. Now I'd like to introduce Roger.
Okay.
Before joining 280 Group, Roger led product teams for over 15 years. He served as Senior Director and VP of Product Management at multiple firms, including OpenWave, Immersion, and Microsoft. As a consultant and trainer at 280 Group, Roger has worked with many companies in various industries, including consumer products, technology, SaaS, mobile, health insurance, and professional services.
Mm-hmm.
He has used his experience to help companies improve their product strategy development, full product lifecycle process, and competitive and market research processes. Roger is a member of the Association of International Product Marketing and Management, a certified product manager, an agile certified product manager and product owner. He has a BS in electrical engineering and computer science from UC Berkeley and an MBA from Santa Clara University. Roger, take it away.
Thanks very much, Rina. All right, so today we are going to be talking about the skills of product management and how do you put a system in place to help those skills grow over time. So before we get started though, I wanted to find out, what do folks think about the discipline of product management? There are so many different aspects of being an effective product manager, but we want to start with a poll of how many skills do you think a product manager needs to be successful? And we've given you a couple of different choices here.
So the poll is now launched. You can please select one of the options. How many skills does a product manager need to be successful? 5, 9, 15, 21, or too many to count? Well, they're coming in right now. Quite a variety of responses so far.
Yeah, it's fun to watch it as the data comes
in. Mm-hmm. You know, I have to say, I do agree with the majority right now.
Oh, right. Yep. And give it another second because there's still quite a bit of data coming in here. All right. And get over 50% voted at least.
There we go. All right. Thank you all for participating.
All right. Can you share the results? Yeah.
We are sharing the results. So, many of you have voted too many to count.
Over half.
Over half.
Okay. It is true that there is a big variety of the skills that a product manager needs to have, right? But what we did try to do was quantify it a bit so that we could make it something that was more tangible and something more measurable. So we, in fact, did boil this down to 15 skill sets for a product manager. And I hope that most of these skills are things that you're familiar with, but I am going to go into a little bit more detail just to make sure everybody's on the same page about what we mean about a few of these things. And as you can see, we kind of split these skills up into two major categories, hard skills and soft skills. So let's talk a little bit about the hard skills. Like I said, I hope most of these are obvious to you, but let me provide a little bit of detail on a few of them. So with respect to business skills, oftentimes product managers may come from a technical background, and they have less of an understanding of how larger businesses, the context of the products that they're working on. So how does your product fit into your overall customer's business as part of this? And also, how does your product satisfy your own company's strategic objectives? So you've got to be able to think about, are you able in a quantifiable way to help your customer's business improve if you're selling a product in a B2B circumstance? Even for an individual though, you need to be able to tell that individual what the value of that product is, and sometimes that value is something about improved efficiency in their life, for example. So you've got to be able to measure those things and understand a little bit about your own business as well as your customer's business. With respect to your own business, it's got to be about what's the return on investment. Is this a profitable product? What are the costs and are they going up every year? How do you manage those costs? So business skills are about being able to understand some of the business aspects of your product, both from the customer's perspective as well as from the perspective of your own business and meeting your own company's strategic goals. End of life is another one that it's kind of a skill that folks don't pay as much attention to, and you're going to see a little bit more about that in a few slides. But end of life is a critical skill. We often like to say when we're training that end of life is like launching a product in reverse. During that process, you've got to be able to maintain customer loyalty, and you've got to make sure that you really are able to increase the lifetime value of that customer to your company, even as you take them through one of these transitions. You may have to take a product off a shelf, or in terms of software, upgrade to the next version. How do you do that in a structured way that satisfies your customers' needs as well as keeps your customers loyal? So that's another major skill that a lot of product managers don't spend as much time on. So I wanted to put a little emphasis on that. I think the rest of these skills are hopefully pretty straightforward. But let's turn now our attention to talking about some of the soft skills. As much as product management needs to be a data-driven profession, one where you're making decisions based on facts and information, you also have to have what we call these soft and leadership skills as well. You've got to know how to get a group of folks together and form a common cause so that they are all interested and excited to be working with you to take this product to market. So that requires some leadership skills, it requires some communication skills. Domain knowledge is a skill of understanding your marketplace. And yes, there is some hard data or hard fact work that has to go into that, but it's also about being able to then express what you've learned about that domain in an effective way that helps, again, drive the team forward and also aligns with your executive team. So they understand why is this product important for that particular marketplace.
That's right. And it's actually important to note here that if you look at the hard skills, it's almost feels like this is the day-to-day life of a product manager, conducting competitive analysis, pricing decisions, all of that. But you cannot ignore the soft.
No.
The soft is so important, especially being an individual contributor, working with the team. These are the skills that really help you stand out. So important, in fact, that we do a whole one-day course just on soft skills.
That's true, absolutely, yeah. So customer knowledge is a key part of this, and it isn't just about reading survey data. It's about being able to get in front of a customer and have a lively, interactive conversation with them, be able to observe them working so that you can actually see how they work. So there's a lot of soft skills that go into attaining great customer knowledge as well. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more the dynamic range of all the different skills a product manager needs to have. Now, earlier this year, we conducted a survey to get a sense of, well, where is everybody on these skill sets? And so this slide shows the results of our benchmark. What were the average skill results across all of the different product managers that we had this survey conducted with? And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on everything here, but I do want to point out some of the top skills and bottom skills, because as a leader of a product management team, let's get back to the point of this whole thing, what are the skills you need to be focused on? So first of all, the easy stuff, right? Most product managers seem to excel at understanding their customers, understanding their marketplace, and being able to communicate. And that's great news.
Yes. We were extremely happy to find this out.
Yeah. It's not terribly surprising with respect to domain knowledge, because oftentimes you start out as maybe a developer or you were working in marketing on the product, so you've got a good understanding already of that market before you become a product manager. So that makes sense, but it's encouraging that customer understanding skills and communication skills were strong rated skills as well. Now, we also kind of have to turn our attention to the other side of the line here and point out that the three skills that came in lowest were, one of these didn't surprise me. End of life doesn't surprise me. A lot of product managers don't spend enough time thinking about how do they make those product transitions. I like to think about it as transitions, but it's end of lifing one version of a product to go to the next one. More surprising, though, was that product managers didn't feel as strong in the skills of competitive analysis and of pricing. And those are critical skills if you want to be able to make your product stand out. In terms of competitive analysis, making sure you understand what your customers value and how your competitors stack up against you in those dimensions of value, and how can you then find ways to differentiate yourself from the competition. And with respect to pricing, are you capturing the right amount of monetary value for the value you give to your customers? Or are you leaving money on the table, or are you pricing so high that you're then missing out on a piece of the market? These are critical factors that are going to drive how you are able to make your product a success. So these were the average skills that we were able to find across all of these product managers. And there's a little thing here, Rina, that I haven't shared with you yet. So I'm going to see whether you pick this up or not, right? You remember how many people we got in the initial survey results, right?
We had over 1650.
That's right, 1682, very good.
1682, yes. There you go.
Well, now, 10 months later, I went back into the data to cut it in new ways for this webinar. Look at the end now, right? Pretty exciting. Okay, so then what we did is I took the information that we had available to us and cut it into a couple of different segments. And this is important for a product management leader to understand. As a product management leader, you've got to be able to have the proper set of expectations of what it is that an early product manager should be able to bring to the table. And here, the early product managers, their skill levels are roughly 11% lower than the average benchmarks that you just saw. Some are lower than others. Obviously, it's an average, but roughly you should expect for a product manager with less than 5 years of experience that their skills are going to be below the average. That makes sense, right? By about 11%. Then when we looked at experienced product managers, and in that definition, I included product managers that had 5 to 10 years of experience. Now they are above the line, right? And you would expect that, right? So there's a swing of 17% here from early product managers to the experienced product managers. They've got 6% above the average baseline of product management skills. Then if you look at folks with 11 or more years of experience, you are able to see that senior product managers, that's how I labeled them, but it's a large bucket, right? They're now 19% above this baseline. So that yellow line that I drew here in the end shows the baseline numbers, the average numbers that you saw on the previous slide. And it lets you see, by comparison to these three different buckets, what the right expectations are, right? So as a product management leader, if you have a mix of product managers with different years of experience, you can use this chart to kind of help calibrate your expectations of how well they should be able to perform. And you can use this chart even to kind of identify areas where, in particular skill areas, there may be even a larger gap compared to the average. All right? So, yeah.
Now we should mention that every person is different.
Of course.
Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. So we do encourage all of product teams to take this survey that we've kind of given out for free, this assessment that we've been using.
That's right.
To take it with your teams and find out and be honest. Right, that's kind of the critical thing here. Everybody wants to improve, and you can't really know where to improve without first measuring where you are today.
Absolutely. And so what we're going to do when we send the follow-up email to this webinar, we will include links to the assessment benchmark report so you can see more about this data, and also we'll send a link to the free assessment so that individuals and leaders can take the assessment and see where they stack up compared to these numbers that are in the average report. All right, so we now have a sense of, okay, we've got an understanding of what are the skills of a product manager, and we've got a sense of what are reasonable expectations based on number of years of experience. How do we get better, right? That's the key thing, right? So as a leader of a product management team, I want to, and this comes from my own 15 years of experience, I want to give you some tips. And some of these were hard-fought tips over the course of my career of a system for how do you improve the skills of your team, right? And here are the 5 keys that I put together. One is you want to establish a learning culture. You want your product managers to just always be thirsting for more knowledge and information, for more skills, in fact, right? Then once you've done that, and by the way, that's no easy task. We'll go into more details about how to do that in a moment. Then we'll talk about different ways to offer training and learning methods that meet the needs of your team, because not everybody's the same. You were just talking about that, right? And the way they learn is not going to be the same as well. We'll talk about the benefits of having a challenge for becoming certified. We'll talk about making your learnings link up to the business cycles at your company. And we'll also talk about the benefits of why it's important to put learning to work right away. All right, so let's dive in a little more depth on how to go about establishing a learning culture. Now, I started from, I've had my own experience about this, but I wanted to get a framework that folks could reference. So I did a little bit of research, and there was an article by Thomas Chamorro-Pramusic, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, and Josh Burson. They put together a great article in the Harvard Business Review, and you can see the link down here at the bottom of the page. That article talks about 4 ways to build a learning culture. And when I read the article, it all clicked for me. It was like, yes, this all makes sense. I've done some of this, and I want to make sure that everybody has a good structured approach to doing this. It goes into how do you go about rewarding continuous learning? How do you give meaningful and constructive feedback? Of course, as a leader, you got to lead by example. So we'll talk more about that. And their number 4 was kind of interesting, hire curious people, right? And we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so I want to check in though. I want to get a sense right now. Let's do another poll. And I'm going to put this up here first, but I want to get a sense of, for your organization, how many of you think that you have this learning culture? And I put up these things, and maybe
Yep, we just launched the poll.
Right? So count up in your head when it comes to rewarding continuous learning, or giving meaningful and constructive feedback, or leading by example, or hiring curious people. How many of these 4 do you think your team is doing well? Right? If it's only 1, then say a little bit. If it's none of these 4 is going on at your team, then be honest, say not at all. If, 2 or 3 of these things, we're doing these pretty regularly, then pretty much is a good answer. And if it's all going on in your organization, then very much so, you have got a learning culture. That's pretty awesome.
All right.
How are we doing on collecting votes?
We have a lot of votes. I'm going to keep it open for a little bit longer.
I'll repeat these one more time if you're still kind of thinking about it, right?
Sure.
Reward continuous learning is going on in your organization. You're getting meaningful and constructive feedback. Your leaders are leading by example, and you do feel like when we hire a new product manager, we are hiring curious people. Count up in your head how many of those 4 are going on in your organization.
Great. I just want to leave it open for just one more second. And right now, a reminder to everybody, as we're going to go into this webinar, please feel free to type in your questions. We will have time for questions at the end.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm closing the poll. So pretty middle of the road.
Okay. With the heavy being a little bit. All right. So certainly some room for improvement, and I'm glad there were some honest folks that like none of this is going on in our organization, right? Okay. So there's room for improvement, right? So let's talk about now the tips and skills to go about creating this learning culture. All right. So the graph at the bottom, by the way, is a chart that I generated from our data that shows that product managers are often learning machines. There isn't a plateau as much in product managers. They are constantly learning. So over the course of their careers, you see their skill levels going up.
Across all the skills.
Yes, across all the skills. Very exciting. But let's talk about this. So when you want to reward continuous learning, here are some tips for things that you want to do. First of all, you want to recognize victories. As a leader of a product management team, whenever one of your product managers hits a major accomplishment, you want to, of course, make that a broadly communicated success story. But I also want to point out, and you want to connect it to the skills that they use to get there, right? That's important because if you can say, look, as a result of this great competitive analysis that Jane conducted, we now understand why we're going to build this new product in this next release. So kudos to Jane for really digging in and doing that detailed competitive analysis. That's what led us here. It's important because everybody on the team then sees that as the leader, you're rewarding growth in particular skills. You're also then trumpeting out that acknowledgement to a large group of people who all see that, wow, product managers have got it going on. And in this case, Jane was great at competitive analysis. So reward and recognize these victories frequently, but also tie it into the skills that were used to achieve that victory. All right, the second thing is I want you to encourage specialists and some cross-training. There are 15 different skills. Not every product manager can become expert at all 15.
Nor should they.
Right, yeah, and sometimes you're going to find that a product manager who does focus on a product, let's say you're focused on a product that is particularly in a particularly competitive market, then competitive analysis is going to be really important for them. Whereas the owner of a product manager who is now running a product that we like to call a cash cow, it's a product that has matured in the marketplace, it's generating great revenue, so it doesn't have to worry so much about competing as much as more about marketing and promotion. Now, that product manager probably should be better at launch and maximize skills. So encourage your product managers. They probably already have a center of gravity that's pretty strong. Encourage them to get stronger about that, and then encourage them to teach the rest of the team about those skills. And that's going to elevate that value, and it's going to show all the product managers, hey, I bet each one of you has some special knowledge or skill to bring to the table. Let's get everybody in the mix, cross-training each other. And that's going to raise everybody's skill levels, and it's going to, again, reward and recognize those folks who are experts at a particular thing. So you want to be able to start that work. Now, another thing to do is spotlight these learnings with things like internal white papers or lunch and learns. So for example, if you send a product manager off to a conference on pricing, when they get back, it's not enough even just for them to start applying that pricing to their work, which of course you want them to be doing, but you want that new knowledge to again be shared across the team. But in a lunch and learn, it's not like an education session. It's more about, here's what I learned from this training. Here's how we can apply it at this business. And lunch and learn should be more than just the product management team. Again, you want to communicate this across the organization. Now, I want to emphasize that you can do this lunch and learn kind of thing about market research, or about learning about your customer knowledge as well. That's valuable. But in this context, it's also about these particular skills. And maybe folks are really not good at getting in front of an audience. So for those kinds of product managers, you could encourage them to write a white paper, right? That could also be something. And it doesn't have to be long. If it's an internal white paper, it's just got to get on the key points of, here's what we learned and here's how we can apply it for our business, okay? Next, I want to talk about, you've got to value the best ideas. And I put the emphasis here on from anywhere, because product managers, we all get pretty passionate about our product. We can possibly get a little bit narrow in our thinking sometimes. So a really good learning culture means that you're going to be willing to hear input from anywhere and anyone. If your customer service rep comes down the hall and has a great idea of, we just keep hearing about this bug, and I think we can not only fix it, but actually enhance the user experience, you want to celebrate that new nugget of knowledge and acknowledge that. And the more you do that within your team, as well as broad spectrum across the entire product management core team, people will pay attention. People will notice, wow, we really do value the best ideas, and no matter where they come from. That's going to encourage everyone to go out and look for those best ideas. Once again, it gets this flywheel of continuous learning going. And yes, I do want to point out, in your quiver. But notice I put this last, right? Bonuses and raises are another way of rewarding continuous learning. Many organizations, for example, will give a salary bump for somebody who accomplishes an MBA. I would encourage you to think about that in a more fine detail. You could give a bonus or an award in salary for achieving a certification, or for going and getting a certificate from a university on a particular subject matter area. But I put this last because survey after survey about about employee satisfaction, almost always the dollars are kind of near the bottom. It's more about these other things. It's more about being recognized for their accomplishments and for bringing new value to the organization. That's actually what gets people excited to work.
Right, and things like lunch and learns, I just want to say, also have the added benefit of bringing a team together, really. I mean, we have it here at 280 Group. Just recently, our own Nicole went to a content marketing conference, came back and shared her learnings with the entire team. Obviously, not everybody from marketing, and everybody learned.
Right.
And everybody also got to appreciate just the strategic importance.
Open people's eyes about, oh, wow, I didn't realize there was so much to this whole content marketing domain.
There's a lot of additional benefits here when you reward continuous learning, and one of them is a team benefit.
Now, before we move on, I want to say one more thing about this. And, this is not something that you just start doing these things and it all starts happening overnight. This continuous learning is a cultural change. So if you've got, and we saw earlier that not a lot of folks had all of these pieces running, but if you can start putting these pieces in place and then start that flywheel turning more and more, it's going to take 3, 6, even 12 months to really get into that change in culture where continuous learning is rewarded consistently and recognized as much, and that's going to then yield a lot of these benefits. So have patience and be persistent as you are bringing more of these continuous learning dynamics to your organization. All right, let's keep going. What's the next step in developing a learning culture? Well, you want to be able to give meaningful and constructive feedback, right? And this is hard. Like, folks have a hard time giving, it's often called constructive criticism. I don't even like the word criticism, right? But I want to emphasize this in 2 parts. First of all, celebrate successes publicly. And when you celebrate successes publicly, then be specific. I talked earlier about connecting to a skill, but you can also talk about the fact that, as a result of this new product update that we just launched, we saw a 3% increase in market share, right? It's not enough to say, great job, Joe, in getting this new product launched. You want to be able to say, great job, Joe, and look at this, we are now gained 3% market share. So be specific in these accomplishments when you are giving this kind of feedback. Now, on the other side of the coin, you want to encourage improvement privately, all right? So you never want to do this in a public setting where you're talking to Brian and saying, you know what, Brian, you really could have done this better, and it's at a team meeting, right? Not a good place, right? It's embarrassing, and it doesn't have the effect that you're looking for, which is actually to improve that person's performance. So you want to encourage improvement privately. And I have 3 tips on how to go about that. You want to suggest the ways to improve, right? And you want to provide specific details, right? Whenever you're kind of pointing out an area for improvement, you need to be able to provide a couple of examples, real specific examples. And if you can, you even provide a specific example where, look, I got feedback from somebody. Now, you don't tell that person's name, right? But it helps that individual absorb that it's not just you, the leader, who's seeing this, but other folks are seeing that this is an area for improvement. And that sinks in more. It makes it more tangible for the person. So you suggest the ways to improve. You provide some concrete evidence that helps them understand what needs to be improved. Then you want to support whatever methods they want to use. You can come with some improvement suggestions, but you also want them to think about it. Because if they come up with a method to improve, and we'll talk about the tool palette of how to go about that in a little while, they're going to own it more. When they feel like it's not the leader dictating to them, I got to go to this webinar and I got to read that book, then it becomes drudgery. Instead, it's like, look, come to an agreement. Yeah, I really want to help you, Brian, improve this way. And what methods do you want to use, Brian, in order to get better? And let them own them, because once they own them, then they're going to feel much more empowered to go and improve on their own. And then lastly, agree on some metrics. In what time frame are we going to be able to track that you have gotten better at this particular skill, right? Maybe we're talking about public speaking, and maybe Brian decides, okay, I'm going to go to Toastmasters. Okay, so let's check in 2 months and 4 months after you've been to a number of Toastmaster sessions and see how are you doing, and then let's set up an opportunity for Brian to give a new talk and measure the effectiveness of that talk, right? Does that make sense? Yep.
Yes, I also want to say that you may want to consider doing meaningful and constructive feedback even separately from positive feedback, because
Absolutely.
oftentimes it's hard to receive feedback that you're not doing a job well, especially a job that you love.
Right.
So it's important to set the goal is the outcome of everybody wants to be better. And if you do it mixed in with the positive feedback, they're not going to hear that. They're only going to leave that meeting saying, oh, I did such a terrible job. And that's not what you want.
Right, right. In fact, there's been articles written about the pillow and the hammer of always, you feel like as a leader, you want to say, you're really, really good, then there's just one little thing, right? And that doesn't work. Like you just said, right? The last point that I want to emphasize here is you need to have a regular cadence for this. It's not appropriate. I think most people know this these days, but you don't wait for the annual review to do this kind of feedback. You want to get into a regular cadence of providing both positive and constructive improvement feedback to your team. So, and particularly what I have found is when you observe something like at a team meeting, you observe something going on, it's great after the meeting, pull them aside privately and say, you know what, I noticed that you kind of stumbled here. Let's talk about that at our next one-on-one. But you then connect it to that moment that allows them to then, at the one-on-one, see, remember we talked about that, right? Then they are able to make that connection more effectively. But the point here is a regular cadence. Don't wait even quarterly, right? Try to give feedback on a much more frequent basis because that's also going to help get that flywheel turning of the learning culture. All right, so we've talked about meaningful feedback. We've talked about laying the groundwork. You don't get to sit back as the leader, right? You've also got to establish your own learning goals, right? And so as a professional myself for 30 years now, I'm still learning. There's a ton of things I'm learning about marketing these days, and I am sharing what I'm learning with my team and digging in and trying to find new techniques and methods, right? So you've got to establish your own learning goals. I recommend too that you hold yourself accountable to a peer. Find another leader in the organization who you trust and share with them, you know what, I really want to get better at, and I'm going to make this, well, not making up for me, I want to get better at understanding the benefits of account-based marketing, ABM. So talk to, in this case, my boss, but other peers and say, look, I want to get better at this, help me stay accountable to this. It's like having a buddy and you're going to the gym together, right? You're both working out together and you're holding each other accountable. So when you actually share your learning goals with someone else, that helps you really keep driving towards that because you don't want to disappoint that peer. It seems like it's easier for us to disappoint ourselves than it is to disappoint someone else. So hold yourself accountable by talking to a peer about this. And then lastly, demonstrate the application of what you've learned by actually showing folks, hey, I read this article, and you can talk about it at your team meeting, and I think we as a result should be doing this, right? Or we went to this webinar, and I think we want to talk about this now. So that you're able to demonstrate, look, I'm not just asking my team to learn, I'm learning as well. So you've got to demonstrate this from the top, all right? One of the tips that I use is I'm also thinking about, well, what skills does my team need to get better at? And so part of my own learning goals are finding topics and finding information to help my team get better at their various things as well. So that helps both me learn as well as encourage the team to keep learning as well.
And encourage your team to also give you 360-degree feedback
Yes,
as well. As a leader, also learn to take constructive feedback from the people you are leading.
No question.
They will tell you straight if you're open to it.
That's absolutely true. Yep, very good. All right, and then the last piece was a pretty obvious one in my opinion. Hire curious people. Whenever that's in my job description of a product manager, they got to be curious to start with, right? So not for product managers in particular, I think that's just a must-have skill. They've got to be curious people to begin with. The other thing about this is when you're hiring folks, if you find that there isn't a fit, if you're really trying to create a learning culture in an organization, also just a high-performing culture, don't suffer a poor hire, right? Because if you hire somebody and after a few months, it's pretty obvious that they're not fitting in, don't just let that go. Either find a way to help them improve or find some other job for them to do that would be more effective. Because when you suffer that, then the whole team gets the message that, oh, I don't have to perform so well and I can be okay in this organization. Mm-hmm. And nobody likes that when you're trying to actually elevate a high-performing team.
Right. You want people who are willing to ask questions. You want people who have indicated an interest in their own professional development. Mm-hmm. I get really excited when somebody comes to me and says, I want to go to this conference for this learning. Mm-hmm. That's, as a manager, I mean, that's what I want.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep. So hire curious people. All right. So we've talked about these elements of establishing a learning culture. Let's talk about a couple of other tips that I have found effective over the years. One is that you want to provide a variety of learning opportunities. It's important to recognize that everyone learns differently, right? So for myself, I found some people are just great readers and they can just learn from a book. They can absorb that concept and they can put it to work right away. Others learn by listening. I learn by listening and then writing things down, right? Anybody who's seen me in a meeting knows I'm always writing, right? So I write stuff down and that's how I learn. Still others are learning by watching others employ a skill, right? So everybody learns in different ways. Of course, learning can be done very most effectively by doing, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, right? But have then a variety of different ways for your team to go about learning. So you want to create this open kind of team library of resources. And we have this here at 280 Group. We've got a bookshelf in the conference room of a wide variety of topics that people can go to whenever they want to look up a topic or figure out how to do something. So we do actually, I know in this digital day and age, but actually having physical evidence of the focus on learning can be valuable. So can you pick a part of a team space where there are a set of books, or you refresh a wall with an updated chart every couple of months? At one company, we actually had in our cafeteria a monitor up, and we would, when we're not just showing company news, also be showing interesting market information, right? So that there was always this new information being presented and making that available. Of course, my list does include a number of online resources, right? So you can either put together on a SharePoint or your intranet shared site online resources, and encourage every product manager on your team to contribute to this. It should be an open resource. Whenever anybody sees something interesting, they can share it on Slack, or they can share it and put it up into this shared resource so that everybody benefits from the articles and content that they are reading. Of course, attend webinars, listen to podcasts. If there's lots of commuting going on for your team members, podcasts are a great way to learn. I love listening to podcasts on my drive. Encourage mentoring. So there's a whole bunch of resources on how to go about mentoring. We've actually had this point in other webinars, and we can send out a link on how to be a great mentee if you want to go out and find a mentor. So you as the leader of the team should be encouraging your product managers to find mentors when they want to seek the expertise of someone that can help them grow in a particular skill. And then, like what Rina was talking about, we get excited when people come to us and say, I want to go to this seminar, I want to go to this conference. So be encouraging about all of this.
Yes, and make sure to budget for it.
You're stealing my thunder. We're getting there.
Darn it.
No, that's all right. But you're right. Budget's important, right? So we will definitely talk about that in a few slides, no doubt. So just create a variety of learning opportunities, right? Now, training, of course, is one of the key ways that folks learn. But again, you want to support a variety of different kinds of training, right? So some folks are really good and self-disciplined and can be self-paced and can go do an online learning system. And they really accomplish that very successfully. Others need a little more help, right? In fact, earlier this year, we saw that need and we launched a new format that allows for a real person to be available once a week to provide some feedback and coaching. And also, again, to set that sort of accountability of, I have to have gotten to at least chapter 3 before my weekly call with my instructor in order to stay on pace.
That is very effective.
Yes, it absolutely is. So it could be that they need just a little bit of a nudge with an online, like with a virtual instructor. Of course, in-person training has a lot of valuable skills that are imparted more effectively in person. And in particular, the group helps itself. Whenever you are in an in-person setting, not only is it the instructor or the materials, but it's also that group setting that can provide more effective learning. The most powerful version of that is when you can bring training in and have it be on site with your team, right? But whatever system or process or kind of thing you're looking for, you want that training to be available multimodal so that it can be available to other teams. Another thing that I mentioned here is use multiple methods with the team. If you do, for example, have in-person private training, but then in 6 months you hire another product manager, if you've got a course that's robust, you can give them the online version so that although they missed that in-person training, they can catch up and get most of the same material by going to the online version of the course. So having training that provides you these different modes just makes it, again, more effective for individuals in their learning styles, as well as for you as a team leader, making sure that there's always a way to get everybody involved. Okay? So training, very powerful. Now, you were talking about this earlier, right? This all sounds expensive, yes. But remember in that learning culture aspect, but I didn't get to salaries and bonuses until the end. So there are things that you can do that are not expensive. They just require effort and attention, right? So yeah, it can be expensive, but I love this quote, right? Yes, so Dr. Charles Duncan McIver, who founded the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, once said, education is expensive. The only thing more expensive is ignorance. And in this competitive marketplace today, when you have multiple companies who are also trying to get the same customers that you are, if you are not developing a learning culture with your product managers so they can develop the best products possible, you're getting behind the curve compared to your competitors, right? So that's your first argument. But I've got more data. So if you are a leader and you are trying to justify your learning budget, your professional development budget, here are some facts that hopefully can help you, right? We've got results that come from our own studies. 17% more productive. We find that folks are 17% more productive after they've taken training, and they can reach 20% higher performance levels relative to their peers. And that's not just us as well. Accenture did a return on learning study, and they found that the return on investment for a learning opportunity was 353%. So for every dollar they spent on learning, they got back $4.53 of increased value. That's amazing. And I've got a link down here on the slide. If you want to read the study, it's actually got a lot more meat in it, a lot more details. Very exciting study. But you can use this slide and the previous one as data to support why you're asking for this learning budget. So as a leader, you can go in prepared with a really good, cogent set of arguments for why you should be able to create a learning culture at your organization. The other aspect of this is these skills are measurable in their improvements. So this is data that we have gathered, and we have seen that product management skills can rise 30 to 49% when you do both training and instantiate a more effective product management process. The combination of those two things can also create a more powerful product management organization. Now remember, earlier on I pointed out the 3 weakest skills, right? We talked about those earlier in terms of competitive analysis, pricing, and end of life. Interestingly, those were the areas that rose the most when we measured the skill changes before and after doing a training and optimization. Competitive analysis, pricing, end of life rose the most. And that was pretty encouraging, actually. And then in some of the softer skills, leadership rises as well. So just gaining confidence in your hard skills can also improve your soft skill capabilities. And Rina was talking about earlier, we do offer courses also on communication skills and on leadership skills. Those are 2 other private courses that we can offer, okay?
So this essentially means that if you are investing in your talent, you can get them focused on the right things. They can learn more about what they feel currently uncertain about.
That's right. They
can perform better. And this doesn't even include job satisfaction, right?
Good point.
If you're thinking about a young person starting out in product management, they're uncertain about their skill levels, you're telling them to do this competitive research project, they're doing their best. If they actually felt that they were invested in and have the skills to do that, then you get the additional benefit of not just investing in your talent, but having them achieve job satisfaction from doing a job well done.
Right, absolutely. And that, again, gets that job satisfaction and career satisfaction wheel turning faster and faster. Everybody gets more excited.
Now you're retaining your team.
That's right. Retention is important as well. So use this data to justify your learning budget, right? On average, the skills increases, the weakest skills improve the most, and you also, last thing I want to add here is that profits have increased. We've surveyed our customers over the years, and our most recent survey found that profits increased from 5 to 34%, depending on the size of the business and what they were working on. So very powerful to be able to create this learning culture. All right, now let's talk about a couple of other tools in your toolbox. Becoming certified can be a challenge that helps folks also achieve continuous learning. right? So having a deadline provides focus, very important when you set a goal. All right, I want to become a certified product manager, or, suppose I want to become a product owner certified by the scrum.org organization, right? There's good certifications out there. Then knowing that the exam is tough encourages more rigor and preparation. You do get a deeper understanding of the skills when you have to study. And I'm not talking cramming like the night before finals in high school. I'm talking about thoughtful, diligent study, right? Because these exams are hard, right? I picked two that I know that are particularly hard. One that's from our own area, from AIPMM, but also I, over the years, have heard that, there's more than one way to get Scrum certified, right? And Scrum.org has got a higher bar, right? So when you get a PSPO, that really means something, right? So by having that deadline, by knowing that you're going to have to really work hard to pass, you actually are a more effective learner. You will gain and cement these skills by then pursuing that certification. And then everything connects from our earlier conversations. You reward that certification either financially or in public when somebody achieves it. All of these pieces come together, right?
Yeah, it's commonly used for promotions, and a lot of people, when they get certified product manager and put it on their LinkedIn page,
right?
I mean, we just see a lot of pride around, I am now a certified product manager.
Absolutely, right? So that's another way to encourage learning in your organization. So this is one that I developed over the course of my career. Learning needs to be tied to the problems that are on deck. And so you, as a product management leader, you need to be having a look long term. Every business you will find typically has a cycle of its business that's pretty repeatable and predictable. So I put up an example here from the last company that I worked at before 280 Group when I was running the product management team. And invariably, there was always a sales kickoff sometime mid-January. We had a key industry trade show that we would always be attending. We had one in January as well as one in March. So I put the March one up here. Mid-year, product managers almost always are now going out into the field and doing a sales update. And when they do that sales update there, we call it the road show. So they go to regional centers and retrain sales or update sales on what's going on. But it's also an opportunity to go visit customers when you're out on the road, right? So there's another big benefit of participating in that. And I have found that September and October are oftentimes the strategic planning cycle. That's when a company is thinking about, well, what's next in our organization for next year? And then there's a lot of work to get that budget approved, typically early December, right? So for your own business, you should be able to put a timeline up on the whiteboard, and you should be able to sketch out what are the predictable, repeatable things that we do as a business. Now, how do I enable my product managers to become more effective at these events, right? So I started kind of at the end because really we're starting at the beginning, right? With the sales kickoff being in January, you can't try to cram that training in at the beginning of January, probably mid to late December, right before the holidays. Can you train your team up on better tips to enable the sales force? What can we do to improve our sales enablement materials? What can we do to make the sales kickoff more exciting for the sales team? So some training them on sales enablement near the end of the year to prepare for that event that right after you turn the calendar, boom, here you go. You got to get ready for the sales kickoff. Prepare for it. Now, when you're talking about an industry trade show, you're going to be wanting to be most effective in marketing your wares, right? So this could be a time to do a product positioning update, making sure that folks are reading materials on the latest ways to position their products or taking a webinar. You also could be, as you're preparing for the road show, making sure that all your product managers are great at interviewing customers. You want them to not only go to the road show, but also make a couple of customer visits. Maybe they need to brush up on their customer interview skills. As we're talking about strategic planning, of course, how effective are we at market analysis? That's going to be a key thing that we want to make sure we really think through all the different lenses we could use to really think about what's going to happen next. And then for the budget, how effective is your team at forecasting? Because if you can forecast your revenues based on your demand forecast, you have a much stronger leg to stand on when you're asking for budget for your next year, right? So this chart is an example. I encourage you to think through what are the regular milestones in your own business, and then what are the learning opportunities that you can advance your product management team up front ahead of these cycles and make the team much more effective. Tie this in with some of the other things we talked about in terms of making public those success and victories, even at like the strategic planning cycle. Say, you know what, George and Karina did a great job of researching the market, and that's why we know what we should be doing for our strategy.
And when you're talking about asking for budget and you can present this kind of strategic view on how am I going to invest in my team. I'm going to be investing in my team based on what the business needs.
That's right.
This is the way that you can actually get the support for learning and team development.
Yeah, the support for your whole team, as well as people are going to recognize, again, the benefits of this team that's continuously learning, right? Now, when you have things that are less predictable, but you can still have a chance to see them coming up, you want to try to put that learning to work right away. So whenever someone comes back from a conference or they've read a series of white papers, make sure there's a project that you can line up that they're able to then apply that learning right away on a real project. And this has, both soft and hard benefits. It does give this sense of confidence by having a quick win. And then there's a sense of applicability. It's like, wow, this stuff I learned really does make sense, right? I have my high school daughter come home all the time and go, we're learning nothing valuable in school, right? And until I can connect the dots and show her, well, actually, you can write a better paper, that's going to allow you to actually get a grant, or is going to allow you to succeed in your journalism career, whatever it might be, right? So you want to, as a leader, make sure you're connecting what are my team learning, how can I get them applying it right away? If there isn't an opportunity to apply it right away, at a minimum, make sure there's a lunch and learn. So there is this opportunity to at least share what was learned more broadly and get the rest of the team available and understanding what is going on and how this new thing that this individual learned can apply to the whole team and the whole organization. And these learning right away things are another opportunity for you to provide proof point to leadership, right? You had to argue hard to get that professional development budget. Every time you're spending that money, make sure you can then show the leadership, look, as a result, this project was this much more effective. And encourage that leader to come to the lunch and learn so they can see the investments paying off that they did fund when they put this budget together. I've done this very successfully at the last two companies I was at, and found that this really helped really get people into this mode of, wow, I get rewarded when I go learn. I get better at my job when I go learn. All right, folks. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. We want to save a little bit of time for questions. But now I want to challenge you. What are you going to do next to improve your product management team? I hope you've got a pen or a pencil out, or if you're digital, you're writing it down on a notepad or in OneNote. How are you going to go about establishing a learning culture? Can you provide the varied learning resources that your team really needs? And you have to kind of help bring those horses to water. You got to provide that so they get, okay, there's a lot of ways I could go about learning on this particular topic. Okay? Then, if you can, like I was talking about business cycles, line up that learning with the way it's going to be applied in your business cycles. And of course, justify that learning budget. You've got to be able to use the data we provided, as well as perhaps some data you've got inside the organization about the benefits of learning, and put together a cogent argument for why you should have a professional development budget. All right? Hopefully, you're going to do all of the above. That's what I'm looking forward to. Right? Now, we're going to do Q&A, but before we do that, we have one final poll. We'd like your feedback. We would like to understand whether this was a helpful webinar in helping you understand how to take actionable steps to improve your product management team.
Like good product managers, we want to get feedback on our own
collecting data.
services.
That's right. Absolutely. Yep. So we'll give you a few moments to chime in.
And in this time, if you do have any further questions, please use this time also to type into the question box. We will be going over questions shortly.
Excellent.
All right.
Very good. So we got the data.
So thank you for participating. Now, let's go into some questions.
Excellent. And so while you're looking at the questions, I will turn the webcam back on. Here we are.
So, the first question is, if there is one piece of learning you would recommend, what would it be? One
piece of learning that I would recommend. There's a lot of things. I would probably go right to sort of the voice of the customer and competitive analysis, right? We talked about earlier in our survey results that we found that product managers seemed a little bit weaker on competitive analysis. So I think that's a key area to emphasize. Understanding the marketplace, understanding your competition. And I would tie that into with voice of the customer. You've got to start from the benefits that you're going to really deliver to your customer. And you can't know those things until you know your customer's problems, their pain points, their needs. So I would say, if I had to pick one above all the others, I would say voice of the customer research, and competitive analysis.
And again, do the assessment with your team to really identify, be data-driven yourself, right? Yes. Identify where does your team need the learning and apply it there. Mm-hmm. So we've actually had a couple questions around curious people and hiring curious people.
Oh, interesting.
So how do you test for curiosity during the interview process?
Okay, good. So I have found there's kind of a set of questions that can help see whether somebody's curious or not, right? Mm-hmm. One of them is, I think you probably have seen, is like, sell me this pencil. I don't have a pencil. Oh, I got a pen. Here we go. Sell me this pen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you put that down. A curious person is not going to immediately go to the benefits of the pen. They're going to start, ask questions about how would you go about using that pen? What are the benefits you need, or what are your problems that you need to solve, right? A curious person is going to immediately start asking questions, right? So you want to set them up with a few questions like that one that help see whether or not they're curious. Another one that I love to ask is, what are you reading right now?
Yeah.
Right? I ask, what are you reading right now? Or I also will ask, what is maybe the most pressing world issue or global issue, or it could be a local issue that you find of concern. And if they come back with really flat answers, or they talk about just the most obvious thing, then you kind of get a sense of maybe these folks aren't as curious as you might expect.
Yes, I definitely have gotten that question before. I've asked what magazines do you subscribe to?
Oh, yeah.
What newsletters? So those are the kinds of questions. You're looking essentially for traits of somebody who likes to learn, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what we mean by curious, the learning aptitude.
Yeah, great question. I hope that helped.
Okay, so we have a lot of other questions. Can you recommend a basic training path leading to the development of a product roadmap?
Okay, so I would encourage you to go back to the chart that showed the early skills and actually download the benchmark report, because in there we do talk about that learning path. We talk about a sequence of events where you probably want to focus on the early skills that early product managers seem to lack most and build those up. And in particular, actually in that list was competitive analysis and voice of the customer and market situation, right? So market research. So those three all are vital to being able to then build an effective product roadmap.
Great
answer. Short because we don't have much time left, so I'm going to get more questions.
All right. I'm trying to get into the PM role job, but only have startup experience. How can I better display these skills?
Okay. So I think being curious, if you're at a company where you're not in the product management role yet, go talk to the product managers, right? Now, if you're a startup, there may only be one or two of them, but try to talk to those product managers, see what they're working on, see where they may have gaps. Especially at a startup, there's way more for them to do than they have time to do, and see whether you could sign up and help them with a particular project. Maybe there's a particular competitor that they just need to do some web research on. That's something you could do. And they could give you an article on what are the right elements to look at when you're doing competitive analysis. And you could go do that work for them. And that would help them as well as give you deeper insight into what it takes to be a product manager and get some of that skill work going. Do that for a while. I have found that if possible, when you want to break into product management, don't try to go out and change both company and job at the same time. Try to be hired as a product manager at a company where you're already valued as a valued employee and they want to invest in your career growth. You express an interest in product management, then they're going to help you make that move. Way more effective to do that than to try to change out of developer job at one company and become a product manager at a different company.
Yeah, and we talk about this all the time. We get asked this question a lot. There's a lot of opportunities out there for you to volunteer with organizations and gain the stories that you need that tell of the experience. Right. So it's always, with product manager roles, it's always going to be about how well do you know your customer. Right. So seek to find organizations that you can partner with, even on a volunteer basis, that help you practice and experience those skills. And
then keep a list. I helped to do this competitive analysis. I volunteered at the Silicon Valley Product Management Association for this topic and so forth.
Okay, we have one here about how could you help me justify my learning budget?
Okay.
I think that's an important one. I feel like we went over it a bit.
I thought we went over that one. So I think use the return on investment research study from Accenture. Use the data from our own benchmark report that shows that when you do training or you do encourage learning, you get significant increases in skills, right? Those should be some pretty valuable pieces of data to help you out.
Okay, let's do one more.
Okay, all right.
And I've had trouble giving constructive feedback in the past. Do you have any advice? So this is a good one.
Okay, great. So always start with a purpose, right? You want to encourage this person, look, I'm not here to beat on you. I'm here to help you get better at your career, right? So you want to get this shared purpose. You want to say, look, you and I, the problem's out here. You and I are going to work together to go solve this problem. Don't make it personal. It's about the problem we want to help you grow in, right? You're there to support their growth. And then you want to give them the specific examples. I talked about that a little bit earlier. And then you want to build a plan. The key thing here is build a plan so that at the end of that conversation, there's a feeling of concreteness, right? When somebody is first given sort of constructive criticism, it can make their stomach drop, kind of make them feel like the ground has been pulled out from underneath them. But at the end of the conversation, you know that, okay, these 1, 2, we have these 3 things you're going to work on. We're going to check in every 2 weeks. And there's a plan that gives that sense of, okay, I get it now. I know what to do to get better, right? So I hope those tips help.
Yeah.
All right, we're at time, and we want to encourage folks to sign up for our next webinar in the series.
So thank you so much for joining us today. We had a great time talking
Absolutely.
about some of great tips for building up your team skills. Join us next time.
That's right.
Where you will be discussing product success in 2020, 6 trends you must track.
Yes, I love this talk. It's always exciting to talk about what are the latest things, both in terms of developing your skills as a product manager, using new tools and capabilities, and also either tech trends or other trends, market trends that are going on in 2020 that may have a big impact on your product. So come back in January. It's going to be an exciting time for us to talk about these things.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll, if we have enough questions here, we'll also send some answers to those questions in a follow-up blog post if we can.
Great. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.